The Metropole Hotel ballroom shimmered just before midnight, heavy with money, power, and unspoken hierarchies. Crystal chandeliers lit a room where billionaires laughed too loudly, politicians smiled too carefully, and status was decided by who stood beside whom. At the center of it all, Alastair Hawthorne basked in attention, confident, untouchable, already rehearsing the victory he planned to announce. Meline Bowmont stood a few steps behind him, flawless in posture, silent by habit. For 5 years, this had been her position in every room. Close enough to be seen, never close enough to matter. When she leaned in and quietly said, "There's still time to reconsider tonight," he didn't turn his head. "This isn't your concern," Alastair replied flatly. "Just stay where you belong." The words landed softly, but something inside her hardened. Around them, the room pulsed with privilege and quiet cruelty, a place where women like Meline were expected to smile while being erased. No one noticed her hand steady as she lifted her gaze. No one sensed the tension tightening beneath her calm expression. What Alastair didn't know, what no one in that ballroom knew, was that the deal he was about to celebrate no longer belonged to him. The power he believed he owned had already shifted, and it was standing right behind him, waiting for the right moment to step into the light. Before this night ended, silence would turn into shock, and the woman everyone dismissed would be the one rewriting the room. If you want stories where underestimation becomes reckoning, like the video and subscribe now to Canada's Heartfelt Tales. This story is only getting started. The moment Alastair turned away from her in that glittering ballroom, the tension around Meline shifted, barely perceptible to anyone else, but sharp and undeniable to her. A string quartet played a polished waltz, silverware chimed, and guests flowed like currents around marble pillars and velvet drapery. Yet underneath the glamour lived a quiet cruelty, the kind that thrived in places where power hovered in the air like perfume. Meline held her breath for a second, just long enough to steady her pulse. She wasn't afraid of the room, she was finished being afraid of it. But stepping into the spotlight meant stepping into conflict, and that was something she had spent years avoiding. Tonight, avoidance was no longer an option. Across the ballroom, a familiar laugh rang out. Bianca Valente, shining in a metallic gown, leaning into Alastair as if she were part of the decor he curated. Bianca's eyes flicked toward Meline, a smirk tugging at her mouth. She whispered something into Alastair's ear. He didn't even try to hide the grin. That tiny exchange was the spark. Meline turned away before the pain could root too deep. She slipped between conversations, careful, poised, invisible only because she allowed herself to be. The chandeliers above her flickered as if sensing the shift. Somewhere inside her, a long muted voice asked a question she had too long ignored. If he refuses to see you, why should you keep pretending you don't see yourself? As she moved, a server nearly collided with her, overwhelmed by the crowd. "I'm so sorry, ma'am." "It's all right," she said softly, steadying his tray. "Take a breath. It's a long night." Her gentleness surprised him. It surprised her too. Kindness had once been her instinct. Tonight strength had to be. She reached the far edge of the ballroom, where floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a living painting. The glass reflected her face, composed, elegant, but carrying a fracture she had glued together too many times. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "You look uneasy," said Robert Vance, his tone unexpectedly warm. He turned. The industrial magnate stood beside her, hands clasped behind his back, his gaze searching. He had been dismissive of her once. Alastair had set that stage himself, but tonight he looked at her with something closer to curiosity. "I'm fine," she replied, though her voice lacked conviction. Vance studied her for a long moment. "No, you're containing something. People who are truly fine don't hold their shoulders like that." She exhaled slowly. "Maybe I'm tired of being defined by everyone but myself." That answer earned a nod, not patronizing but respectful. "You know," Vance said quietly, "a man like Hawthorne only understands impact. If you want to break a pattern he built, you'll need more than dignity. You'll need precision." Her breath stills. And what makes you so sure I don't have it? For the first time that evening, Meline watched someone react to her. Not the wife, not the ornament, but the force beneath. Before Vance could respond, the lights shifted, dimming as the stage brightened. The host stepped up to the microphone, his voice booming through the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, may we have your attention? Our keynote speaker and tonight's philanthropic champion, Mr. Alistair Hawthorne. A wave of applause crashed over the room. Alistair ascended the stage with the confidence of a man certain of worship, Bianca glowing at the edge of the spotlight. Meline returned to her table, sliding into a seat near the front. Her heart was steady now, almost eerily so. As Alistair launched into his speech, a polished story of innovation, expansion, progress, the crowd hung on every word. He gestured broadly, a king praising his own kingdom. Then he reached the part he had been hungry to announce. And tonight, he declared, I am proud to say that Hawthorne Industries is in the final stages of acquiring Helios Innovations. This merger will redefine our technological future. It will secure our leadership for decades. A murmur rippled across the room. Anticipation, admiration, envy. But not from Meline. Her hands folded neatly in her lap, she whispered under her breath. No, it won't. The journalist host stepped forward, card in hand. Mr. Hawthorne, before we continue, I've just been given a breaking update. Alistair frowned at the unexpected shift. The host cleared his throat. Helios Innovations has just announced a strategic partnership with a private investment group. This group, over the last 6 months, has quietly acquired a 52% controlling stake. Silence slammed across the ballroom. Alistair took a step back. That's impossible. The host raised the card. The new majority shareholder will be taking a public role as strategic director. The investment group is called Orion, and its principal owner is. He paused, savoring the momentum twisting tight like a wire. Ms. Meline Bowmont. Gasps detonated through the ballroom. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. All eyes turned toward her. She stood slowly, the crimson dress catching fire in the spotlight as she walked forward. Measured, graceful, powerful. Bianca's jaw dropped. Alistair's face drained of color. When she reached the stage, she took the microphone. Her voice was calm, but it carried like steel wrapped in velvet. Helios stands for creation, not destruction. Growth, not conquest. Values, not ego. Her gaze found Alistair's, steady, unblinking. I believe in supporting vision, not exploiting it. Her words echoed, not loud but resonant. Even the chandeliers seemed to hold still. The applause began with Vance, then Tanaka, then the entire room, rising in a wave that crashed around her like vindication. As she stepped down, guests parted for her as though witnessing a coronation. Alistair tried to follow her backstage, eyes burning with disbelief. You set me up, he hissed. You humiliated me. She didn't flinch. No. I revealed the truth you refused to see. Bianca tried to intervene. Alistair, Meline stopped walking and turned her head just enough. Bianca, my issue isn't with you. You never owed loyalty to a man who offered none. But you might consider choosing your alliances more carefully. Bianca's confidence evaporated. She stepped back silently. Alistair grabbed Meline's arm, but she shifted away before he could tighten his grip. Don't touch me, she warned, not loudly, but in a tone that froze him mid-motion. Security, unsure of the tension, subtly approached. Alistair released her immediately. She walked out of the ballroom without looking back, the click of her heels slicing through the aftermath. The limousine ride home was a storm without thunder. Alistair sat rigid, staring at the window but seeing none of the city lights streaking past. You made a mockery of me, he finally snapped. You made that mockery yourself, she replied. As they entered the penthouse, he slammed the door behind them. How long have you been doing this? A month. 2. 6, she said evenly. His face contorted. You think you're smarter than me? She didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. "Where did you get that kind of money?" he demanded. "My grandmother left me a portfolio." "You dismissed her as insignificant. Like you dismissed me." He paced furious. "So this was revenge?" "No. This was responsibility. Someone had to stop you before you gutted a company that could change lives." "Don't moralize at me," he roared. "Then stop giving me reasons to." She walked to the guest wing. "It's over, Alistair. The marriage, the pretense, the silence. I won't live in a cage you built around your own insecurity. You can't just leave. I already have." Behind her something shattered. Glass or ego or both. 3 days later, the consequences arrived like a tidal wave. The board called an emergency meeting. Investors demanded explanations he couldn't give. Headlines exploded with praise for the silent strategist, and ridicule for the blind billionaire. Bianca resigned publicly. By the end of the week, Hawthorne Industries stock dipped 8%. And for the first time in his career, Alistair Hawthorne was asked to step back while the board evaluated leadership stability. The punishment wasn't theatrical, it was surgical. He had built a kingdom on the illusion of invulnerability, and she had pulled out the keystone. One carefully executed move at a time. But the story wasn't finished. Because the moment he thought he had lost everything, he learned he was wrong. There was still more to lose. And Meline was not done. When the board's decision arrived, it came without ceremony. Alistair was removed from day-to-day control. His influence reduced to a title few respected anymore. He stood in his dim office, staring at the skyline he once believed he owned, realizing power had never been the foundation he thought it was. It had always been trust, something he had broken long before the gala. Meline, meanwhile, walked through the Helios research floor for the first time as its new leader. The team greeted her with quiet hope, not fear, and she felt the weight of the past loosen. She hadn't won to prove him small. She had acted to make space for something larger than the world he tried to confine her to. As she paused beside a glowing prototype panel, its soft light reflected the certainty in her eyes. Sometimes change doesn't roar. Sometimes it simply refuses to disappear. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales so more voices can rise from the shadows.